Hi, everyone. Good morning still. So Steph and I have the privilege to kind of start the closing discussions of this retreat. And so over the next two classes, you'll be able to get together not only in your small groups, but also in your respective regions to really think about and synthesize what it is that you have saw, what is it that you have heard, and what is it you have learned throughout this conference. And so I know there's been a lot of workshops, a lot of different classes, a lot of different sharings, and we want you to have a time to really think about how that all comes together, and ultimately how that will empower you to serve as bodhisattva leaders in your own communities, as well as to create larger families of bodhisattvas in your respective homes, or your respective communities, and your respective regions. And so, just to remind us, we've had 4 spiritual soup ingredients. Can we remind each other what those are? And you guys can call it out. Gratitude, contentment, understanding, and acceptance. Okay, great. And so let's remind each other what each one of them actually means. So can I get a volunteer to share what contentment means, or the key ideas from that class yesterday? Steph, get a mic. Can we get a mic there? Thanks, Amanda.
Hello?
To be happy with what you have.
To be happy with what you have, yes. Does anyone have anything to add on? Yes, behind there.
And to be at peace with what you don't.
To be at peace with what you don't. That's a great definition. Now let's move on to gratitude. Can we get some hands for what was covered in the gratitude class?
The quality of being thankful.
Being thankful. Okay. And does anyone want to add on to that? Okay, great. I think being thankful really does summarize what being grateful and having gratitude is. So the next 2 spiritual soup ingredients were understanding and acceptance. And so we'll move on to understanding. Does anyone want to share what the idea or the concept of understanding represents? Or why it's so important for us to have understanding?
Should be able to stand in someone else's shoes and talk in their perspective.
Right, spot on, right? It's to be able to empathize with someone else, to really be able to seek and understand what they're feeling and wanting to do something about that, right? And wanting to act on that understanding. And the last spiritual soup ingredient was the class that we just had, which was acceptance. Does anyone want to share what they just learned from the last class?
Acceptance is to recognize and honor whatever happens is whatever happens, and to use that as a baseline to move forward from that moment instead of rejecting what happened.
Thank you so much for sharing. Right, so I think that's absolutely correct. So just in summary, we've gone through the 4 ingredient spiritual soups. Here are the definitions. So contentment, again, was the state of being able to have expectations and have ideas, but in those expectations to not be attached with what you have, right? To be able to remain with no afflictions, even in the presence of these expectations. With gratitude, it's about being able to show appreciation, but also return the kindness that we receive. And in the gratitude class, we talked a lot about the duality between the giver and the receiver. Just as when you give something, you also receive something at the same time. And so in that moment, we can really practice our gratitude. Understanding was the idea of being able to empathize with how others think, how others feel. And it's not just empathy there. It's then being able to act upon that, right? And take it a step further to really guide your actions in how you want to interact and how you want to develop the relationships you have in a understanding manner. And lastly, acceptance was about being able to stay unafflicted, to be able to embrace everything with an open mind and with a flexible mind, to be able to meet others where they are. And so now that we have summarized the 4 spiritual soup, I want to give you all the opportunity to share in your respective regions about what you have learned and how you will apply these 4 principles in your regions and in your work in your home communities. And to do that, I'm going to pass the mic off to Steph, and she'll share a little bit about how the regional discussion will work.
All right, hi everyone. Thank you, Steve, for the great introduction. So as retreat comes to a close, we really want to provide a space for everyone to reflect on the richness of what you've learned throughout conference and think about how to integrate these kinds of concepts back into your respective regions and chapters, right? So during this time, you'll have about 20 minutes in your regions to discuss a series of questions regarding what you've learned, share really sentimental activation moments that have affected you personally. There are about 4 questions, so you'll have about 5 minutes per question for each group. Something to note is that larger regions who have more attendees will be divided into smaller groups, so please try to average around 7 to 8 people per person, okay? And because our time is so limited, not everyone will have a chance to answer every single question. Just be mindful to make sure everyone is participating in that conversation and is engaging and sharing as well. So at this time, we're going to, let me move on, introduce the discussion groups. So at tables 1, 2, and 3, that'll be for Washington, D.C. Again, you can divide yourself amongst how you so feel is appropriate. Just make sure that groups are pretty evenly split. Now, tables 4, 5, 6, 7 are for Mid-Atlantic. Tables 8 and 9 will be for Northeast. Tables 10 will be for National Headquarters, Northwest, and Pacific Islands. Table 11, Southern and Central. Table 12, Midwest, Canada, and Taiwan. So remember that the purpose of this time is to begin a conversation that's going to form into measurable actions, right? To start that conversation now and then be able to continue it when you get back into your chapters. During your conversation, please designate one person to take notes, to write down all these ideas, and then also one person who can be the same or a different person to share later as a group. We're going to come back after your small discussions to do sharing across our groups, okay? So at this time, you can break.